It's our first, full non-holiday day of 2018. My entire life, the first couple of weeks of the new year, I always, well, we used to write checks. Now, I guess it's more online banking and whatnot, but I would always get the year wrong. But here it is, 2018. It's amazing. And as we're going forward, sometimes it's useful to look back, and I'm not talking about, any kind of wrap-up or anything like that. I'm talking about looking back to 1940 to get some sense of where we might be or we might be going. History does, what is it? What's the old saying? History doesn't move in cycles, but it does rhyme, or, words to that effect. Anyway, Louise and I over the weekend went to see Darkest Hour, the new movie about Churchill, and about this roughly month and a half long period in the history of England when Chamberlain stepped down, Churchill became the prime minister, and made the decision to take the United Kingdom into World War II. And it's an amazing movie, and I highly recommend it. And in the movie, Churchill calls Franklin Roosevelt. And I'm not, I hope I'm not spoiling the movie for you. I can't imagine that I am, because all of this stuff is history. I mean, we all know the story. We know exactly what happened. We know how it turned out. It's just so brilliantly performed and brilliantly acted. And there's, and his relationship with King George VI, and just the, there's just all kinds of really cool stuff in there. But at one point in the movie, he calls FDR and says, "Help!" Right? I mean, his army is trapped in France, literally entire army, 300,000 British soldiers. His army is trapped in France. The Nazis have enclosed it, have largely encircled it. And they're trying to get them off the continent and back to the UK. And he's just facing this terrible crisis, and he calls FDR and he says, "We need your help." And FDR says, "I can't do it. Congress passed a law saying I can't help you against the Nazis." And in fact, Congress did pass that law. When my dad was still alive, this was maybe 30 years ago or thereabouts, my father gave me for Christmas one year, as I recall, might have been my birthday. My dad was a book collector. He had 20,000 books in his basement. And my dad gave me as a gift this book edited by Rex Stout. Rex Stout was the guy who created Nero Wolfe, the fictional detective. And he was the most widely read, widely published author in the United States in the 1940s. The Nero Wolfe series was, he'd sold over 70 million books. And during World War II, he worked in the Bureau of Propaganda to, help encourage Americans to fight World War II. And after World War II, he compiled a list of speeches that were given by members of Congress, the House and the Senate, on the floor of the House and Senate. These are all public speeches, urging the United States not to help the United Kingdom in their fight with Hitler, which, as I said, led to this law that you will see in this movie, Darkest Hour, which I strongly recommend you go see. It's just an amazing movie. I actually had tears in my eyes a couple times during the movie. It's just a brilliant movie. So they were virtually all Republicans. This was the America First movement. We don't need to defend Europe. Let Hitler do whatever he's doing. Well, let me just read you some of the speeches. This is from George Bender, a Republican from Ohio. He says, "I wish to call attention to a statement made by an expert, Colonel Lindbergh." Now, you'll recall Charles Lindbergh was saying, hey, Hitler's not so bad, and we don't need to... He was, one of the champions of the America First movement. Anyhow, he says, he's quoting from Lindbergh, quote, "Let us not be confused by this talk of invasion by European aircraft." See, in other words, don't worry, there's no threat from Hitler coming to the United States. He says, "The air defense of America is as simple as the attack is difficult when the true facts are faced. We are in danger of a war today, not because the European people have attempted to interfere with the internal affairs of America, but because American people have attempted to interfere with the internal affairs of Europe." Oh my God. We're upset with Hitler. "Regardless of which side wins the war," they're still quoting from from Charles Lindbergh. Regardless of which side wins the war, there is no reason, aside from our own actions, to prevent a continuation of peaceful relationships between America and the countries of Europe. In other words, Lindbergh saying, you know, if Hitler takes over Europe, that's fine. We can do business with Hitler. And then you get into the real reason for this. The real reason that the Republicans were fighting so hard to prevent FDR from going to war in 1940 was because they believed that if FDR entered the war in Europe in 1940, keep in mind in 1939 Hitler had invaded Poland, if we entered the war in 1940, then the belief was that FDR would win a third term as president, which, by the way, happened. But they didn't want that to happen. And they thought that FDR, they asserted, the Republicans asserted that FDR was trying to generate war with Europe just to become a third-term president. So here, again, this is Republican Congressman, Ohio Republican Congressman George Bender. Any device at all that suits the convenience of President Roosevelt in order to get us into this war by the back door, the power of peacetime conscription in the hands of an administration that is proved by its record to have used every conceivable excuse for regimenting America, overturning all tradition, and changing our form of government, is nothing but an invitation to disaster. You get this? He's saying the Franklin Roosevelt administration throughout the 1930s, by saving America from the Great Depression, the Republican Great Depression, regimented America. Yes, we forced, you know, companies to pay into unemployment insurance funds. FDR created unemployment insurance. We required people to pay into Social Security. Oh my God. Overturning all tradition. Yes, let's integrate the Army. And changing our form of government. Well, FDR sort of did. I mean, we became more of a democratic socialist country. But the Republicans were not at all happy about that. This is Hamilton Fish. He is the Republican from New York. This is June 22nd, 1940. Again, this is, you know, leading up to the election of 1940. Colonel Lindbergh was right when he said in one of his recent speeches, let us stop this hysterical chatter about calamity and invasion that has been running rife in these last few days. It is not fitting for the people who built this nation. The only reason we're in danger to becoming involved in this war is because there are powerful elements in America who desire to take part in it. Let us have an end to the secret diplomacy and the secret commitments of President Roosevelt that have brought ruin and disaster to France, and from which we have escaped only by a miracle and the will of the American people expressed through Congress to keep America out of the war. President Roosevelt alarmed the nation by his inflammatory Italian dagger thrust in the heart speech. Whom do we fear? Do we fear Hitler, who seems afraid to attack England over 20 miles of sea when he would have to cross 3,000 miles to get here? This is preposterous. Let us stop this fear hysteria. And then the Republican representative from New York, Hamilton Fish, on the floor of the House of Representatives, September 3rd, 1940, you know, FDR was talking about maybe we should start a draft. And he says, peacetime conscription in America is the direct road to Hitlerism, dictatorship, and National Socialism. If we adopt peacetime conscription, we are merely copying Nazi methods and ideology. We have much more to fear from the war makers from within than from our enemies without. Right? We have more to fear from FDR than we do from Hitler. It's incredible. But we're back there again, where the Republicans are basically selling out their country for political gain. And this only this time they have Republican control of the House, the Senate, the White House, and the Supreme Court. But this is the direction that they're going.